On October 14th, the U.S. government announced one of its most significant operations against what it described as a global scourge of human trafficking and cyber-enabled financial fraud. In the action, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions on 146 individuals and entities connected to the Prince Holding Group, one of the most prominent conglomerates in Cambodia. Designating the group as a transnational criminal network, U.S. officials accused Prince of running giant online scamming operations that had defrauded billions from people across the globe. The UK government simultaneously announced its own sanctions on the Cambodian firm. It also froze 19 London properties worth more than £100 million that it had connected to the Prince Group network. In addition, U.S. federal prosecutors charged Prince Group's chairman, Chen Zhe, with wire fraud and money laundering connected to online scamming operations. As part of the case, prosecutors seized just under $15 billion in Bitcoin linked to Chen. It was the largest asset forfeiture action in U.S. history. Chen was no ordinary criminal. Chinese by birth, the 38-year-old had arrived in Cambodia in the early 2010s and quickly established connections to the highest reaches of the country's political and economic elite. Chen received prestigious titles and was appointed a ministerial-level advisor to both former Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen and his son and successor, Hun Manet. The Prince Group network was one part of a criminal industry that has sunk deep roots across Southeast Asia. Over the past 5 years, hundreds of thousands of people have been trafficked by criminal gangs and forced to work in giant online scamming centers that have sprung up in Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, and other nations. From huge prison-like compounds, these cyber slaves have run scams on victims across the globe. The annual losses are estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. How did the online scam industry take root in Southeast Asia, and how did it grow to such massive proportions? You're watching the Diplomat Asia, your go-to source for Asia-Pacific news and analysis. In this episode, we discuss the rise of the scam industry, the damage being done around the globe, and the efforts to crack down on the criminal networks involved. Before we continue, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Ever receive a suspicious text message from an unknown number? There's a good chance that it originated in a place like Sihanoukville. Not so long ago, this port city in southern Cambodia, named after the country's former king, was a sleepy place, its golden beaches popular with Western backpackers. Around 2015, however, the city began attracting huge infusions of Chinese money. Overnight, Sihanoukville became one of the region's fastest-growing cities. Tens of thousands of Chinese nationals relocated to the city. High-rise hotels and apartment buildings shot up along its beaches, and dozens of small casinos and online gambling operations opened their doors. This construction boom was brought to a halt by the COVID-19 pandemic. As Chinese expats began returning home in droves, Chinese casino operators responded to the downturn in business by branching out into a new and hugely lucrative industry: cyber scams. Setting up in hotels and casinos, and later purpose-built compounds, Chinese criminal syndicates put thousands of people to work running romance and crypto scams. New digital technologies, including cryptocurrencies, then facilitated the concealment and laundering of the proceeds from these operations. It was a perfect storm, with several factors coming together to create one of the world's largest, most lucrative criminal enterprises.
Large populations of predominantly China-originating organized criminals migrated to the region about 15 or 20 years ago and have gradually built very, very close collaborative partnerships with local elites in some of the key Mekong sub-region countries, including Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. So you can kind of look at the scam industry as a combination of those state crime partnerships alongside explosive growth in a number of technologies and an emergence of a gambling and gambling adjacent physical infrastructure that is basically a perfect storm for this type of criminal activity to take place. And all of those preconditions were in place by the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then you basically have this situation that is really primed for a massive epidemic of cyber criminal activity, then just get injected with an enormous volume of newly vulnerable labor from across the region. Having lots of people who were out of a job that weren't previously likely to be vulnerable to trafficking into industries of criminal activity, newly vulnerable to that.
Since then, the cyber scam industry has expanded rapidly in Cambodia, in militia-controlled parts of Myanmar, and in regions of Laos, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Unique among legal industries, online scamming has two sets of victims. The first are those targeted by the scams across the world, many of whom have been robbed of their life savings. The second are those coerced into working in prison-like scam compounds. The numbers here are alarming. In 2023, the UN Human Rights Office estimated that at least 100,000 people had been trafficked into online scamming work in Cambodia. Those who have escaped report being subject to beatings, mistreatment, and torture at the hands of criminal gangs. Survivors told Amnesty International that they would be beaten or shocked with electric batons for failing to meet scam targets or trying to escape. Most of these victims have hailed from Southeast Asia, China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, but some have been recruited from as far away as Africa and Latin America.
The epicenter countries are not only Myanmar, but also Cambodia and Laos, and collectively there is a 40 billion plus per year scam economy that spans these three countries, this rivaling really the size and scale of the formal economy in each of these countries.
You'd think that a criminal industry involving potentially hundreds of thousands of human trafficking victims and billions, if not trillions, in stolen funds would spark a strong crackdown. But in Southeast Asia, that hasn't happened. Despite the destructive nature of the scamming industry, the region's governments and the world have been slow to respond. Part of the challenge is that scam syndicates are highly flexible and adaptable. All these operations need is empty office space and an internet connection. It is also true that governments have been slow to recognize crimes that mostly impact people beyond their own nation's borders. But perhaps the biggest challenge is the connections that these criminal operations have established to the region's political and business elites. Before last month's action, Prince Group was one of Cambodia's most prominent conglomerates. It had interests in real estate development, banking, finance, and consumer services, and its advertisements graced the pages of government-aligned newspapers. As well as serving as an advisor to Cambodia's Prime Minister, Prince Group Chairman Strangio was a prominent philanthropist. He donated to charities, including the Cambodian Red Cross, which is chaired by Prime Minister Hun Manet's wife. Chen also set up the Prince Foundation, which spent millions on education, healthcare, and community initiatives. When Cambodia hosted the ASEAN Summit in 2022, a Prince subsidiary made limited edition luxury watches for Hun Sen, who gifted them to attending world leaders. Prince's connections to the centers of power in Cambodia effectively bought him protection from the law and from the Cambodian government's periodic crackdowns on the scamming industry.
The Cambodian state itself is involved in an end-to-end way in these criminal operations, from the trafficking of people through Phnom Penh International Airport and the new airport as well, to the use of military and law enforcement personnel within Cambodia to defend and guard the compounds. You have compound owners and key beneficiaries closely linked with, and in many cases, actually the same person as local elites within the upper echelons of the Cambodian People's Party. That group of people would involve senators, governors, unit chiefs of police and military units, family members of the prime minister, senior advisors to the prime minister. So the very, very ultra elite within the Cambodian People's Party's elite patronage networks. From what we can tell, this is likely the most lucrative industry in Cambodia's history. So this is a transnational criminal industry that has tentacles in many, many, many countries, certainly every country in the region, potentially most countries all over the world. And this is not specifically a Cambodia problem, but Cambodia is likely the absolute epicenter.
Investigative reports have implicated high-ranking Cambodian tycoons and politicians in the growth and operation of scam centers. Among them is Lee Yong Pat, one of Cambodia's richest men, a close ally of longtime Prime Minister Hun Sen and a sitting senator for the Cambodian People's Party, or CPP. Last year, Lee was sanctioned by the US and UK governments for his involvement in forced labor, human trafficking, and online scams. Another is Kok An, also a CPP senator and a prominent tycoon, now wanted by Thai authorities in connection with scam operations in the border town of Poi Phet. The Cambodian government has repeatedly claimed that it is taking steps to combat scams. But in a June report, Amnesty International concluded that Cambodia's government was complicit in industrial-scale online scamming operations and had failed to effectively investigate them. In its report, Amnesty identified 53 scam compounds. It found more than two-thirds of these had either not been investigated by police or had continued to operate even after investigations by the Cambodian authorities. This may explain why, despite periodic crackdowns, Cambodia's scam problem has continued to fester.
There's this enormous repository of potential pressure aimed at the regime, and the main way that the regime has countered has been through performative crackdowns. So whenever there is a sufficient amount of buildup in international pressure about this issue, you do see a number of crackdowns happen, but those crackdowns have been uniformly joined by the simultaneous expansion of the compounds, and they also have typically been matched with tip-offs, with documented evidence of the people inside those compounds being moved to other locations in a sort of elaborate shell game that takes place. And so you'll see a compound go dark, then a performative raid happen, a very small number of people be wrapped up in it, and then within a few weeks, the compound reopening. That has been a pattern of state involvement in this industry over the last 3.5 years.
The situation in Myanmar is more complex. For decades, Myanmar's ethnic conflicts and fragmented state jurisdictions have created the perfect conditions for transnational crime, particularly narcotics production. This situation has been compounded by the military coup of 2021, which has inflamed the country's conflicts, empowered local militia groups, and led to a spike in criminal activities of all kinds, including financial fraud operations. While cyber scam syndicates have established themselves across Myanmar, there have been two major centers of these operations. The first is along the Chinese border in northern Shan State, particularly the Kokang region, which until 2023 was an autonomous zone controlled by the junta-aligned Kokang Border Force. The second is a strip along the border between Thailand and Myanmar's Karen State, which is under the control of the Karen Border Guard Force. Led by Colonel Saw Chit Tu, a renegade former member of the Karen National Union, the Karen Border Guard Force has presided over the construction of giant scamming hubs north and south of the border city of Myawaddy.
All of the groups hosting the industrial-scale online scam operations, they either have ceasefires with the Myanmar military or they're directly under the Myanmar military, serving as a border guard force which is integrated into the military and a part of the junta. So what this means is that the scam centers actually provide a lot of financial resources that can be used by armed groups that are aligned with the Myanmar military or which are directly under the Myanmar military.
After years of inaction, the region's governments may finally be waking up to the extent of the scamming problem, but the word crackdown might be too strong. Thanks for watching this far. If you're enjoying our content, visit thediplomat.com for comprehensive coverage of Asia-Pacific geopolitics. Use the link in the description for 10% off your first year's subscription. Growing pressure from foreign governments is finally forcing Southeast Asian authorities to take steps against the massive scam operations.
If you go back to early 2023, China began putting strong pressure on the military junta, demanding that it take efforts to crack down on online scams along the Myanmar-China border. The military not only failed to do this, it actively pushed back, sending senior officials to China to tell the Chinese not to send police, not to worry about this, to reboot tourism, and to provide it with more support, economic support, rather than worry about anything related to transnational crime.
In late 2023, China pressured Myanmar's military government to clamp down on scams being run by the Kokang Border Guard Force, which were targeting Chinese nationals. When that failed, Chinese officials gave a green light to a rebel offensive that shut down the scam operations in Kokang. Those responsible were then deported to China, where they were recently sentenced to death. Beijing has also pressured rebel groups in other parts of Shan State to shut down scamming operations.
This was Operation 1027, which was very explicitly framed around eradicating online scams. And so you saw that China strategically leveraged Operation 1027, at least the first phase of it. Now, what happened next, though, after that was China pivoted away quite significantly from applying pressure to the Myanmar military to applying pressure to the very resistance actors that helped it deal with this security challenge. The reason that it did this was that it was not, I think, expecting at all that the resistance would go on to launch Operation 1027 Phase 2, which saw the resistance push into the Myanmar heartland, capture territory in Mandalay, and then also actually capture Laoshu.
In early 2025, China's government also began pressuring Thailand's government to get more serious about combating scam operations in eastern Myanmar. This followed the high-profile abduction of a Chinese actor named Wang Xing, who went missing near the Thailand-Myanmar border in early January. After a surge of concern within China, Wang was rescued a few days later from a scam center in Shui Koko, a notorious scamming hub to the north of Myawaddy. The case prompted the Chinese government to increase its pressure on Bangkok to take more concerted action to combat scamming syndicates that have popped up around its borders. Thailand subsequently cut supplies of power, internet, and fuel to border areas known to harbor scam operations. It requested arrest warrants for members of the Karen Border Guard Force, including Sawchit Tu, and initiated probes into local Thai police officials suspected of collusion with criminal syndicates. Thailand also arrested and charged more than 100 Thai nationals following joint raids with the Cambodian police on suspected scam centers in the border town of Phoi Phet. However, cooperation between the two neighbors broke down after a border dispute erupted between the two nations in May. As relations deteriorated and the two sides shut down border crossings, Thailand launched a crackdown on Cambodia-based scamming operations. One Thai minister openly accused Cambodia of harboring cybercrime networks, which he said were being supported by powerful people within the Cambodian state. In July, Thai police issued an arrest warrant for the Cambodian tycoon Kok An on charges of money laundering and involvement in a transnational criminal organization. It raided homes linked to the businessmen and seized more than $33 million in assets. Cambodia's government vociferously denied the Thai allegations, which were subsumed in the border conflict that erupted between the two nations on July 24th. Thailand also recently issued a warrant for the arrest of Lee Yong Pat, another prominent Cambodian tycoon with links to the Hun family. The recent joint British-American actions against Cambodia's once untouchable prince group has further increased the pressure on the region's governments.
On October 14th, the US and the UK levied the first joint sanctions against elite perpetrators in this industry, Chinza, Prince Holding Group, and an array of affiliated entities, shell companies, co-conspirators. This is, with no real close comparison, the largest criminal asset forfeiture in history, not just from the US government, but from any government. But it was expanded in its impact because the U.S. Department of Justice decided to simultaneously unseal an indictment against Chinza, who they have shown in 28 pages of evidence to be both a leading regional elite criminal and also a leading state actor involved in organized crime. We know Chinza to be a senior member of the Cambodian government who served as a personal cabinet-level advisor to the current prime minister, the former prime minister, and also, until very recently, a named business partner to the sitting deputy prime minister. Prince Group was put front and center at major galas and events. He was the level of both reputational and money laundering that were pushed through this Prince brand are really hard to overstate for the Cambodian government, as well as the extent to which elite actors within the Cambodian government actually depended on him for patronage. In any way you look at this, the cumulative effect of these actions, the delegitimization, the missing assets from a major criminal industry, and on, this is material.
While continuing to deny any involvement, Prime Minister Hun Manet's government has announced the formation of a national cybercrime task force and promised to work with international partners to bring scam syndicates to heel. It has since raided scam centers across the country and suspended the licenses of 14 casinos, including some linked to the Prince Group. Authorities in Singapore, Taiwan, and Hong Kong have also seized hundreds of millions of dollars of assets linked to the Cambodian conglomerate. Meanwhile, the action has reverberated in Thailand. The country's role as a financial gateway to Cambodia and Myanmar-based scam operations has come under increasing scrutiny. Two members of Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakun's government are accused of links to scamming syndicates. Facing an election early next year, Anutin has set up a special team to track suspicious movements of funds and pledged an all-out crackdown on scammers, human trafficking networks, and drug rings. Even the military junta in Myanmar moved to try and frame itself as cracking down on the scam industry.
So effectively what this did was it sent a signal just ahead of the ASEAN meeting of just how much the US and the UK are also now prioritizing this issue And I think this was something also that the Myanmar military thought it might potentially respond to because of that coming ASEAN meeting and because of the fact that it wants to try to get more countries to recognize its coming sham election, that this might be a way to potentially send a signal to the US, the UK, other countries that it has an interest in trying to do something that is a clear priority on the part of a growing segment of the international community.
The junta-raided KK Park, a giant scam hub south of Myawaddy, appearing to affirm its intent to combat criminal activities, including cyber scams. This might be the end for Prince Group, but is it the end for Southeast Asia's scam epidemic? It may be too soon to say. Even now, Strangio and Prince Group are fighting the allegations. On November 11th, nearly a month after the US and UK sanctions were unveiled, the company issued a statement denying all wrongdoing. The statement also cited a report in Global Times, a Chinese state media outlet, questioning the legality of the US government's seizure of $15 billion in Bitcoin. The friendly report, in a Chinese state-run outlet, would seem to suggest that Chen still has friends in high places.
In terms of a meaningful, sustainable, long-term deterrent and disruptive effect on the industry, it really comes down to what happens next. If the US and the UK government declare mission accomplished and try to frame Chen Zhe as an outlier rogue criminal actor, this is going to be a speed bump for these criminal enterprises. You've seen more and more over the last couple of days and weeks, some performative crackdowns again from the Cambodian government, revoking the licenses that Jinbai Group, one of the Prince affiliates, held. But you're seeing widespread growth, sometimes just directly across the street, of existing compounds owned by other criminal nodes. And while removing $15 billion from this system is, again, meaningful, there is just a vacuum now that's going to be replaced if more is not done to demonstrate to Cambodia that running a scam state is not an acceptable way to run a country in 2025.
The Cambodian government has a long track record of cosmetic crackdowns that do little to disrupt the functioning of the industry, an industry whose profits remain vital to the functioning of the country's political system. Thailand's government has an interest in deflecting attention from allegations that it has failed to tackle or even been complicit in scam operations. And in Myanmar, many observers are skeptical that the military's motives are genuine, noting that scammers continue to operate in many regions of the country.
The area targeted in KK Park is less than 1% of the overall population of scam compounds that is there along the Moy River. And so really, this is not a systematic move to crack down on scam syndicates. Instead, the Myanmar military sent in military forces. They didn't really have to fire a single shot to enter, of course, the area, because the area is under control of the Myanmar military's border guard force. Many of the scam syndicate bosses already had information about what was going on, so they simply went somewhere else. And then you had large numbers of people who took the opportunity to flee, but a lot of these individuals were captured by the border guard force. They were resold to other scam compounds. The next thing the Myanmar military did was it started this even bigger stunt of bombing buildings inside of KK Park, destroying large amounts of infrastructure and housing and buildings that actually could have been put to use for the Myanmar people. And so in this case, what the Myanmar military has done is it's senselessly blown up property while doing absolutely nothing to dismantle the scam syndicates. It simply displaced those into other areas.
National efforts alone may not be enough to bring Southeast Asia's cyber scam scourge to an end. Even if their efforts are genuine, the region's governments could be left playing whack-a-mole with the criminal syndicates that have shown an ability to pick up and relocate quickly in response to crackdowns. In the end, a transnational challenge requires a transnational solution. Without great international cooperation, Southeast Asia's scam gangs could well live to fight another day.
The war on drugs has been in existence for nearly 100 years, and there are more people producing more drugs, distributing them to more people in more places around the world than there were 80 years ago. by almost any measure, scams, transnational fraud in a sophisticated industrial format like we're seeing emerge in this phenomenon are a more insidious form of crime that's going to be harder to crack down than drugs. By that logic, it's important for us to recognize that we likely are not going to eliminate this as part of our society. The best that we're going to be able to do is to blunt the growth curve. And so what I think ultimately that should mean is, if we're serious about this, we need to make sure that first and foremost that the international community is united around the idea that scam states are not an acceptable way to run a country.
Thanks for watching The Diplomat Asia. Now you know all about the scam industry in Southeast Asia. If you liked this video, check out our explainer on toxic rare earth mining in Myanmar and the China connection. And leave a comment below if there's a topic you'd like to see covered in a future video.